Hey guys, welcome to Brian's Man Cave. This is another episode of Amazing Games from A to Z, and today's letter is B. So, if you haven't seen the first video, essentially what I do is I just select a bunch of games, all starting with the letter, and all from different systems, like whatever systems I could find, and just kind of talk about the games that I think were cool, or the ones that I played. You know, I mean, this is strictly my opinion. I mean, this is a biased opinion. I'm not just going to, you know, just throw every single game at you from that letter. This is just the games that I like or select, or maybe think that they were pretty cool on the system. And especially if I had some experience with them. So, I'm going to start off with my favorite system, and that's the Intellivision. And I actually found quite a few games from the Intellivision that started with B. And so I was going to start with the first one, which is Bump and Jump. I did a video on this not too long ago, and I think it was a comparison video. And this is a pretty surprising game on the Intellivision. I mean, it's a port, so it's on a bunch of other systems. There's an arcade, so it's nothing unique to the system. But it's a really great game for what it is. I mean, it's like a car game essentially, and you know, you got to go through all these levels and stuff. Like, it's pretty cool. It's actually a pretty fun game. The graphics are great. The sound is great. You know, it really did push the limits of the Intellivision. I believe it was one of the later games too. You know, when they had the white label and stuff. The next one I was going to show, and I know I just did a video on this one, Bomb Squad. It's an IntelliVoice game, and it talks if you have the IntelliVoice module. And I just like this one because it was different. It's a different kind of game. I mean, from all the other games that I played on the Intellivision, this one was really different because you're actually like defusing bombs and you're trying to save a city. You're not some character running around. You're not in a spaceship. You're just defusing bombs. And even today, I find that I've never found a game similar to this. It's kind of interesting. It's one of those games that, you know, whoever like the people who had to decide this and come up with a concept and all that stuff really did a good job in thinking outside the box. So it's actually a pretty cool game. Now naturally this one, Burgertime, again it's another port, but I think on the Intellivision it's my favorite port of Burgertime. I know I did a video on this one as well quite a while back, one of the first few videos I think I did, and I kind of compared it to other systems as well. But I always said that the Intellivision version was my favorite. And I mean, it's got great sound, it's got great graphics. I don't know, it's hard to say anything else. Like, it's a really great version of the game. And of course on the Intellivision. And if you compare it to like the Atari version, I mean, this is just like leaps and bounds over it. It's not 100% accurate to the arcade. I'll give it that. It's got its own unique level system. But I mean, it's burger time. You're making burgers. You're running away from the pickle. You're running away from the weenie guys and the egg. So it's burger time. This one's kind of interesting too. Boxing. Now, obviously, it's a sport title. You can get boxing on pretty much every system, especially like the older systems. They'd have, you know, the Atari has boxing, and yeah, I mean, this was just one that I played a lot when I was a kid. I played with my friend a lot. We played this all the time. It's very simple form of boxing. I mean, it's just, you know, there's nothing overly complex about it. You only get like really, like you do get a few punches. I don't know. Yeah, I got the overlay in here, so you can see there. You got the keypad, and you can you know, different kinds of moves and stuff like that. So it's not like in the Atari. There was really just, you know, you just punch and move. Whereas this actually gives you, you know, there's what, pull punch. What's that say? Fent, duck, and so you could use your left hand, your right hand. You know, like, it's actually quite a little more intense, and there's more going on. But I mean, graphically, it's very, very simple. I mean, it's literally just, you know, you can tell what it is though, and that's the other thing. Like, when you look at that, you know that that's boxing. So, and the sound's not too bad either. And the final one is this one is Beauty and the Beast. I played this a little bit, and the thing I like about it is that they try to take the concept of Donkey Kong and just kind of make a different kind of game out of it. So it is similar. I mean, you can see you got the layers. You know, you're going up a building. There's a guy at the top, a big guy at the top, and you know, you're trying to save your girlfriend. So it's really taking the Donkey Kong, and they just, instead of making like a Donkey Kong clone and just trying to make, you know, mimic the full-on Donkey Kong look, they came up with their own game. And you can see it's got the like the tower and stuff. It really kind of has that King Kong appeal to it. But I guess they just went with Beauty and the Beast. I'm not really sure what the reasoning behind that was, but it's actually a pretty decent game on the Intellivision. So yeah, and you know, Magic is the company. They had all these fancy silver packaging, and they seem to make quite a few games. Like even for the Atari, they made a lot of great games, and so you know, I think they actually spent some good time building kind of unique games. So the next system I was going to move on to, and I know you're probably saying, you know, there's probably other titles. So I'm just going to move on to ColecoVision, and only because this is the only one I had for the ColecoVision that was B, and that's Beam Rider. And this game is great on pretty much every system it's on, even the Atari. Sadly, I don't have the Atari version. In fact, the funny story about this one was I was buying this in a flea market, and I remember I was picking out a whole bunch of Atari games, and this one was in there. And I think they didn't realize it was a Coleco, and I didn't even notice it either, because it kind of looks like the same cartridge. And I thought it was an Atari 2600 cartridge. And so when I bought it, I got home, and I you know, foolish me, went to try and stick it into my Atari, and it wasn't working. You know, it's got those notches, or whatever you want to call it, right there. That makes it a little bit different than an Atari cart. Obviously, it wouldn't work even if it did fit into the slot, because it's a different game, it's a different system. But I mean, it didn't bother me because I have a ColecoVision. But it is Beam Rider, and it's another one of those classic games. I think everybody likes it on pretty much any system you can get it on. In fact, I even noticed I have it on the Commodore 64, and I probably had it forever, and I didn't even realize I had it. So it was just, I was going through my Commodore 64 games, and I'm like, hey, I have Beam Rider. I need to try that out one day. This one I didn't spend a whole lot of time on, though. I have to, you know, I have to dedicate some time to it. I think I just plugged it in to make sure it worked, and that was about it. But definitely a good title for the ColecoVision. Speaking of the Commodore 64, I did have a few discs that I pulled out that all started with B, and so the first one I'm going to say is Beachhead. This is like a war-style game. And it's multi-level. There's lots going on. There's you know, each level's different. You have to go through a different thing. I mean, it's one of those games where you really have to spend the time on it. You can't just throw it in there and just have a quick game. And there's a lot of interesting stuff happening in there. It's actually a pretty decent game, and I used to play it from time to time. I think there's even a Beachhead 2. I don't think I have it. But yeah, I mean, I spent a lot of time playing Beachhead on the Commodore 64. Pretty decent game. And then there's Bop and Wrestle. I was never a big fan of wrestling games, but this was probably the first wrestling game I played. And I think this was one of these games where they were fairly cheap, I think. This was 1986. And I remember seeing this one a lot in like when I'd go into the stores like Kmart or wherever, when I'd be buying my my Commodore games and my Intellivision games. And this one was always fairly cheap, but it's actually a pretty decent wrestling game. It's not really licensed with, like, you know, WWF or anything like that, so there's no famous titles or people in there or anything like that. It's just a generic wrestling game, and I think a lot of people that have a Commodore 64 probably have this game. It's actually pretty decent. And the last one, this is just a copy, but is Bruce Lee. Now, Bruce Lee, I spent a lot of time playing on the Commodore 64. I think it's a very interesting platform-style game. There's so many facets to it, so many different levels. You're going up, you're going down, you're going left. You know, you got to go through all these different booby traps. Again, I did a video on it not that long ago. Probably want to check that one out if you're interested. But yeah, Bruce Lee was definitely a Commodore 64 game that I played a lot. And I still enjoy playing it today. I'm not as good as I used to be. In fact, in my video, I don't even think I didn't even complete it. I got pretty far, though, and I was pretty impressed on how far I got. Because I was just so out of practice. I mean, hooking up the Commodore 64 again and diving into the games, it's like, wow, I haven't played these in so long. I mean, that's the problem with retro gaming, right? You have a ton of them that you probably put away when you start playing the little bit newer games, and then you start to lose it. You start to lose your memory on how to beat these older games. So it's kind of fun, you know, doing this and going back to these old games. So then the next one I'm going to jump into is the Atari, and the Atari 2600. Didn't find any real titles on the 7800. There probably is, but I don't own a whole lot of 7800 Atari games. So I just grabbed the two that I know are big titles, and well, the first one's Berserk. Again, I did a little video on this one. I think it was when I was comparing it to Venture. I don't mind it. It's not a bad game. I just didn't get into it as much, but it's definitely a stellar title for the Atari 2600. A lot of people love this game. And then the other one, which I thought was interesting, was Barnstorming. It's a nice game that you could just throw in and just have a quick game, and I mean it's not a lot to it. I mean, literally you're going up and down. You're avoiding the barns and what are those things called? Those towers. So it's really just it's one of those games you just plug it in and just try and beat your last time, and it's kind of addictive sometimes. Like you just get into it. I know a lot of people talk about this game, and you know, Barnstorming's up there with one of those great must-own Atari games, and it's Activision, so you know it's a good title, because pretty much every Activision game is a good title. They might have the odd one that's, yeah, but I think Barnstorming is actually pretty decent for the Atari 2600. Now to wrap this up, I looked into my Nintendo stash. I even went online and looked up some of the Nintendo titles that started with B, because I was like scratching my head on there. I'm like, did I play anything in Nintendo that started with a B, or at least that I own, anyways? And the only one that I really thought of was Batman. You know, it's obviously based. Oh, they tried to base it on the movie. That's the movie symbol from Michael Keaton, the first one. And you know, I did play a little bit. I also played Batman on the Commodore 64 as well. My friend had it, and we spent a lot of time playing it. This one's a little similar. Again, you know, the whole platform style game. It's actually not too bad. And you know, I was going to say the other one I was going to mention was Back to the Future. Now, I think that one I like it because it's Back to the Future, and not because it's a decent game. Because the game is very frustrating. And it's, you know, LJN, sorry, that made it, and this one, it's actually fairly good, and a lot of people have done videos on this one. I need to try it out again. I know I played it a bit when I first got it. You see, I bought this pre-owned. This is back when Nintendo games were fairly cheap. I paid like, I think $6.99 for this. It's probably worth a little bit more than that now. But it's a decent game, and I did play it a bit when I bought it, so it's another one I'm going to have to try. Maybe do a playthrough or do some kind of thing with it. I don't know. Maybe talk about it for a movie game or something. But that's so that's rounding up my my selection for amazing games that start with B. I know I probably missed a ton of titles, and that's what I mentioned before. This is my biased opinion. This is based on stuff that I've played or that I'm aware of. And, you know, I'm not going to be just labeling off every single game that starts with B. I mean, that's kind of defeating the point. We could all just look up games and be like, oh, you forgot this one, this one, this one, but I might never have played it, or maybe just didn't like it. Anyways, hope you liked the video. Let me know what you think of the games I've chosen. Let me know what your thoughts are. Maybe throw some other games at me that start with B, and let's see if we could create a different list. Anyways, hope you subscribe to my channel. Talk to you later.